Hi, fourth grade. This is your second science video for this week. So we are looking in your packet at animal and plant classification. Has a picture of a turtle on it. Or a picture of a dolphin. But the title is Animal and Plant Classification. The author of this is Laura Johnson. So go ahead and get that booklet out so that you can read along with me as we go through this booklet to learn about classifying animals and plants. You're going to want to get a pencil so that you can fill stuff in as we go along. Before reading activity is just like our previous activity we did on plants and animals. It's going to be a KWL chart. So again, with your pencil, before we read, you're going to fill in the column for K of what you already know about classifying plants and animals. Just jot a couple of things down about how you know how to classify plants and animals. And if you don't know anything, that's okay too. Not a problem. Go ahead and just leave it blank, and then we're going to move on. You're going to fill in the W of what you want to know. So if we don't know anything yet, there's got to be something that we want to know about classifying animals. And if we do know some stuff, I'm sure there's a few things that you still want to learn about classifying animals. We are not going to fill out the L column yet. We fill out the L column when we're done reading the booklet. Now with science, we know it's nonfiction. Everything in it tells us facts. So we're going to be thinking about that as we're going through the booklet. Animal and Plant Classification by Laura Johnson. We're going to use all of our reading skills that we've worked on this year to help us understand the science that we're learning. So we're looking at this page. The header, which tells us about the paragraphs, the header that we're looking at is the building blocks of living things. So we're going to start with the header because we always read left to right, top to bottom. We're going to start with the header, then we're going to read the paragraphs, and then we're going to look at the picture. And there's another text feature with this picture that's called a label. And it's going to label something for us. Now also you'll notice on this page you have a word in bold. These bold-faced words are another text feature that we use when figuring out nonfiction stories. The bold words are all listed with their definitions at the back in the glossary. It has the word that's in bold in the booklet and then the definition or what it means. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd love for you to read along with me so that you practice those reading skills. Starting with the header, the building blocks of living things. Think about the building blocks you played with when you were younger. You started with just one block. If you put a few blocks together, you could build a house. If you put many blocks together, you could build something complicated like a castle with towers. All living things, plants and animals, are made of cells. A cell is the smallest unit of a living thing. You can think of cells as building blocks. Some living things are made of just one block or cell. Most plants and animals are made by putting thousands, millions, or even billions of cells together. Cells can have many jobs. Some cells help a living thing to be healthy. Other cells help it to adapt to its environment. Microscopes make objects appear larger than they really are. By looking at cells under a microscope, scientists can see inside them and learn how they work. And this shows us in the picture a microscope. Micro means tiny. So the scope, which helps us to see, it helps us see tiny things that we would not be able to see just using our normal eyesight. So this microscope is looking at a blood cell, and it labels these red circles as blood cells. This is what it would look like under the microscope. Looking at the next page, we are going to start with the header, read the paragraphs, and then go back and look at these pictures. These pictures are a text feature called diagrams. Diagrams have labels that label the parts of the picture. So you'll see there's a line showing you where the label fits to the part. So we're going to start with the header, the parts of a cell. Cells have different parts, and each part has a specific job to do. The nucleus is like the brain of the cell. The instructions for the cell's job are stored in the nucleus. The cell membrane, I apologize, everybody makes mistakes, right? The cell membrane is a thin covering all around the cell. It has two jobs. It separates the cell from things around it. It also acts as a guard that decides what can come into and go out of the cell. Cytoplasm holds everything a cell needs to carry out its life processes. It is a material similar to jelly that fills the cell. The nucleus floats in the cytoplasm. Plant cells have the same parts as animal cells, plus some extras. The cell wall is outside of the cell membrane. The walls of all the cells help hold up a plant. Chloroplasts are the parts of a cell that trap energy from sunlight so that a plant can make its own food. Looking at the pictures, we're going to start with the animal cell. You can see this outer layer is the membrane. In the very center, it tells us, is the nucleus. And then that inner section around the nucleus is the cytoplasm. Looking at the plant cell, you have the cell wall, and you can look and see it actually looks like a wall. You have the center, which is the nucleus. And then you have these little things floating around in between the wall and the nucleus that are called chloroplasts. We are now looking at the page with the header From Cells to Organisms. From cells to organisms. Cells have different shapes depending on the kinds of jobs they do. For example, nerve cells are very thin. They act like wires that send messages through the body. Nerve cells can be as long as your arm or as short as the period at the end of a sentence. Cells that look alike and have the same shape do the same job. These cells combine to build tissue. For example, nerve tissue is made up of nerve cells. Tissues of the same type combine to form organs. For example, the brain is an organ that is made up of nerve tissue. We're going to read the next page because this is a continuation from the same header, and then we'll look at the pictures across the bottom. Organs that work together form an organ system. Two organs, the brain and the spinal cord goes down your back, build the central nervous system in your body. An organism is the complete living thing that is made when all the parts are combined. An organism is made of many cells. Unlike an organism, a virus is a very tiny particle with similarities to both living and non-living things. It uses plant and animal cells to make more viruses. So looking at the pictures, this is the picture of the central nervous system. You have the brain up top, and along your backbone here, you have your spinal cord, which is made up of nerves. This is a picture of a brain. This is what nerve tissue looks like. And this is what a single nerve cell looks like. We're now looking at the page that has the picture of the dolphin at the top and the header that says sorting living things into groups. Now we're getting into classifying. Sorting living things into groups. There are more than 1 million organisms. Who keeps track of them all? Biologists. So that's a job you can think about if you're really interested in science, is becoming a biologist. In order to identify, compare, and study all these organisms, biologists use a classification system. Using this system, they place every kind of organism into a group. All the organisms in a group have common characteristics. So they have things in common, things that are the same. Biologists would ask questions like these to help them decide if a shark and a dolphin belong in the same group. Do sharks and dolphins have one cell or many cells? They have many cells. That is a common characteristic, so they belong in the same group. Where do sharks and dolphins live? They live in the ocean. This is another common characteristic, so they still belong in the same group. How do sharks and dolphins get oxygen? Sharks get oxygen from the water. That would be through their gills. Dolphins get oxygen from the air. That would be through their portholes. That is a different characteristic, so they belong in different groups. Now we're going to look at kingdoms. Kingdoms, the largest group. Kingdoms are the largest groups in the classification system. Many scientists divide organisms into 6 kingdoms. The kingdom that an organism belongs to depends mostly on how many cells it has, what cell parts it has, where it lives, and how it gets its food. And then it has a chart for you here. The 6 kingdoms of living things. So we're going to read down through the green part, although yours is in black and white. So we're going to start on the side and read straight down. And then we'll talk about the number of cells, the cell parts, the habitat, and the food source. So the first kingdom is ancient bacteria. Ancient means really, really old. Okay. Then the next kingdom is true bacteria. The third kingdom is Protists. The fourth kingdom is fungi. The fifth kingdom is plants. And the sixth kingdom is animals. Now you'll notice there are specific numbers of cells to fall into each kingdom. If you look at the next column over, number of cells, ancient bacteria have 1 cell. True bacteria has 1 cell. Protists usually have 1 cell. Fungi usually have many cells. Plants have many cells, and animals have many cells. So following that chart, so far we have 3 that are more likely to have 1 cell, and 3 that are more likely to have many cells. Now we're going to look at the cell parts. Ancient bacteria has no separate nucleus. True bacteria have no separate nucleus. Protists have a nucleus and other cell parts. So now we're noticing there's a difference. We have 2 that still have no separate nucleus, but that third one that was still in the same group as the bacteria is now separated from it to its own group because it has a nucleus as well as other cell parts. Fungi have a nucleus and other cell parts. Plants have a nucleus and a cell wall. Animals have tissues, organs, and systems. So they're the most complex. Looking at habitat. You have ancient bacteria and true bacteria with land or water. You can find them on both. Protists is water or damp land, places on land. So they could be found on land, but only in very wet places. Fungi is mostly on land, not as much on water. Plants and animals are found on land and water. Looking at the last column is the food source. Ancient bacteria make their own food. True bacteria, some kinds get food, but some make their own food. Protists, many get food, but some make their own. Fungi have to go get their food. Plants make their own food. And animals have to go get food. It seems like a lot, but when we start taking one specific thing, living thing, and breaking it down based on these categories, it helps us figure out where it falls in the classifications. So turning the page, we are looking at dividing the kingdoms. Dividing the kingdoms. Sorting living things into 6 kingdoms is only the beginning. Next, scientists divide the members of each kingdom into smaller and smaller groups. They use organisms features to decide which organisms are in each group. After kingdoms, the groups are divisions, classes, orders, and families. The last 2 groups are genus and species. Scientists use these last groups to name animals. A genus is a group of animals that are similar in many ways. For example, a dog and a wolf are members of the same genus. Their genus is Canis. The genus group is divided one more time into groups of species. A species is a group of animals whose members can reproduce. The species name often describes where the animal lives or what color it is. The first part of an animal's scientific name is the genus. The second part is the species. So although you might name your pet dog Max, his scientific name would be Canis familiaris. And looking at the bottom, it has the family showing a puppy dog and 2 different kinds of wolves, and then broken down into the genus where it has the puppy dog and only 1 kind of wolf, and then the species, which is just the puppy dog. Looking at the next page over here, we're going to start with the header, How Living Things Are Classified. How living things are classified. At the right of the chart is the kingdom, the largest group to which your family dog belongs. The groups get smaller and smaller and more specific until the final 2 groups, which form the animal's scientific name. So this chart shows all of it together. We just talked about family, family, genus, and species. Now we're going to add them to all the other classifications. So we start with the kingdom, which is the animal kingdom. Then we go into the division, then the class, then the order, then the family, genus, and species. And notice that each time we go down a level, we're eliminating some of the animals because they no longer meet the requirements to be a part of that group. Until you get all the way down to the species where you're left with 1 puppy dog. We are now looking at the header, How Scientists Classify Plants. So we just talked about animals. Now we're going to talk a little bit about plants. How scientists classify plants. To sort plants into groups, scientists look at 2 main characteristics. One is the way that a plant transports water and nutrients. The other is how a plant reproduces, moving water and food. Some plants, called vascular plants, have parts that look like tubes. Water and nutrients from the soil move up and down these tubes to the roots, stems, and leaves. Vascular plants are all around you. You may have stepped on some this morning. If you walked on grass. If you had celery with your lunch, you ate one. The tissue that makes up the tubes supports a plant's stems and leaves. Because of this, vascular plants can grow to be very tall. And as you can see in the picture, it tells us this is moss. It labeled it as moss. So now we're looking at this page. Plants without these tubes are called non-vascular plants. These plants pass water and nutrients through cell walls from one cell to the next. This process is very slow, so non-vascular plants usually grow close to the ground. That way, water and nutrients do not have to travel so far. Some non-vascular plants are mosses, lichen, and algae. Reproduction. The second way that scientists classify plants is by how they reproduce or make new plants. One group reproduces by making seeds. A seed is a structure with a protective covering. Inside the seed is a young plant. In plants with flowers, the seeds are in the flowers. And remember, we covered this in our previous science lesson on plants and animals and the life cycle. Conifers are plants that make seeds but do not have flowers. In conifers, the seeds are in the cones, like the pine cones that we talked about in our previous lesson. Some plants have no seeds at all. They use spores to reproduce. A spore is a single cell surrounded by a cell wall. It can grow into a new plant if it falls on a place where it can get the water and food it needs. Ferns and mosses have spores. And you'll see in the picture, it's labeling the seed for this picture. We're now looking at the header that says how scientists classify animals. How scientists classify animals. The animal kingdom is divided into two main groups. One group is vertebrates, or animals with backbones. The other group is invertebrates, or animals without a backbone. Vertebrates. Scientists have divided vertebrates into 5 smaller groups. This chart shows the characteristics that are true for most of the vertebrates in each group. So you'll see on the chart, the vertebrates are mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. They're vertebrates because they all have backbones. Then they're divided into categories titled covering, breathing, and birth, how they give birth to their babies. Is it a live birth or are they hatched from eggs? Looking over at the next page, we're looking at reptiles. And remember, in our previous science lesson, we talked about the life cycle of an alligator. Reptiles. Let's take a closer look at one group of vertebrates, reptiles. Reptiles include lizards, snakes, turtles, crocodiles, and alligators. These animals live in the water and on land. As you can see from the chart, reptiles breathe air with their lungs. Many people are very surprised when they touch a reptile for the first time. They expect them to be wet and slimy, but they have dry skin covered with scales. People often confuse crocodiles and alligators because the bodies of these reptiles are similar in many ways. An easy way to tell them apart is to look at their mouths. You can see a crocodile's teeth when its mouth is shut, but you cannot see an alligator's teeth in that position. And you can see in the picture, it has an alligator with a closed mouth. You cannot see any of the teeth. But with a crocodile, closed mouth, you can see its teeth right there along the edge. Another good way to tell is most crocodiles live in salt water, and most alligators live in freshwater. Looking at the page, the life cycle of a reptile. The life cycle of a reptile. Sea turtles spend most of their time underwater, where they swim, sleep, and eat. Like all reptiles, they have to come to the surface to breathe air with their lungs. If they are swimming, they need to come up for air about every 5 or 10 minutes. However, if they are asleep, they can stay underwater for hours. Male sea turtles rarely come onto land, but female sea turtles come on land about 6 times each nesting year to lay their eggs. And then it shows us in the picture, a female sea turtle lays her eggs on land. And then the caption at the bottom is, baby turtles hatch from the eggs between 45 and 70 days later, and they make their way to the water. Looking at the next page, we are looking at animals without a backbone. Without a backbone means they are non-vertebrates or invertebrates. animals without a backbone. Animals without a backbone are called invertebrates. You might be surprised to learn that most animals in the world are invertebrates. Arthropods are the largest group of invertebrates. This group includes ticks, spiders, bees, shrimp, scorpions, and centipedes. At first, these animals seem very different because some swim, some fly, and some crawl. However, they have two common characteristics that cause scientists to group them together. The first characteristic is that all arthropods have legs and a body that are divided into sections. The second is that all arthropods are covered with a lightweight, hard skin that protects them. This hard skin is called an exoskeleton. And it shows you, it labels, this is a bee, this is a centipede. Looking over at the next page, we're going to continue on. The second largest group of invertebrates are mollusks. This group includes scallops, oysters, squid, and snails. Mollusks have soft bodies. Some have a hard shell and some don't. Most mollusks live in water, but some live on land in damp places. Most mollusks are only a few inches long, but a few kinds are huge. Giant clams, for example, can grow to more than 4 feet long and weigh more than 500 pounds. And this is a picture that shows you this is a squid. And this here is a scallop. We're now looking at the page with the header that says the life cycle of a mollusk. The life cycle of a mollusk. When octopuses are ready to mate, the male fertilizes the female eggs. The female attaches the fertilized eggs to a rock or places them in a hole. Over the course of several days, a female may lay more than 100,000 eggs. If the female has laid her eggs in a hole, she will often seal up the hole to protect the eggs and ensure they are not harmed. Think about that. If you have a chicken at home, or if you've seen chickens, they lay 1 egg a day. So over the course of several days, they might lay 3 or 4 eggs. This octopus lays 100,000 eggs. That's a lot. Moving on. Females guard the eggs constantly, meaning all the time. Depending on temperature, the eggs hatch anytime between 4 weeks and 7 months later. A short time after the baby octopuses emerge from their eggs, the female octopus dies. When the baby octopuses emerge from their eggs, they float to the top of the water. They stay there until they grow larger and can return to the bottom of their water habitat. And this shows you the cycle. It shows you an adult octopus, the eggs that it lays and what they look like, a baby octopus after it's hatched out of the egg, back to the adult octopus. Now we're looking at animal adaptations. Animal adaptations. Adaptations are physical features or behaviors passed on from parents. Adaptations help animals get food, protect themselves, move, and reproduce. Animals with the best adaptations have a better chance at getting the resources they need, so they have a better chance of reproducing. Adaptations that help and protect. Many animals have physical adaptations that help them move. Did you know that birds have hollow bones to make them lighter? Did you know that fish have bags of air in them that help them float? Or that flamingos have long necks so they can submerge their heads in water to find food in the muddy bottom? What about snails? They have a flat foot that oozes a sticky liquid. They move by sliding along paths of their own slime. Shapes and colors can provide protection by making animals nearly invisible. When the long, thin razorfish holds itself straight up and down in the water, it looks like a piece of floating grass. Features such as claws, tusks, and horns protect some animals. Looking at the next page over, up at the top with chemicals. Chemicals are another kind of adaptation. Some chemicals give animals a nasty smell or taste so other animals won't eat them. Others poison their victims. An octopus can use its sharp teeth to drill a hole in a clamshell. It then injects poison through the hole. After the clam is poisoned, its shell can be opened easily. And it shows you a picture of the octopus with an up-close picture of its sharp teeth that it uses to drill the hole in the clam. Last page, we're looking at animal instincts. Animal instincts. Instincts are behaviors that are inherited from parents. These natural behaviors tell young animals how to move, how to hide, and how to catch food. They will remember these things all their life. Remember the baby turtles that find their way to the sea. That is an instinct. Migration and hibernation. And we learned about migration and hibernation and animal instincts in our previous science lesson. So this is just a continuation to help build your knowledge base. Migration and hibernation. Migration is an instinct. Many animals migrate to find food as seasons change. Arctic terns leave the Arctic Ocean in the fall, when the ocean begins to freeze and fish are scarce. They fly to Antarctica, where fish are plentiful. In the spring, when the ice in the Arctic Ocean begins to melt, the terns fly home to nest. Another natural behavior that does not need to be learned is hibernation. Some kinds of mammals, reptiles, and amphibians hibernate or become inactive when the weather is very cold and food is hard to find. Chipmunks, for example, eat a lot in the fall. The food is stored as body fat that gives them energy during winter when they hibernate. They don't sleep straight through the winter, but wake for short periods to move around and snack on saved food. Animals learn. Not all animal behaviors are instincts. Many animals learn behavior from their parents. Mother bears teach their cubs to fish, and wolves have a way of teaching their young to avoid traps. All living things, from the smallest cell to the largest organism, can be classified. Knowing the classification of living things gives us information about what they are made of and how they adapt. And then it shows us in the bottom of this picture is a hibernating frog. Then we have our glossary with all of our bold words and the definitions for each word. So now I want you to go back to the beginning and I want you to fill out the L column in your KWL chart. What did you learn from this book about classifying animals? Something that you did not already know. Then you're going to do the after reading activity. Did you understand? You're going to use the chart, or you can draw your own chart on a separate piece of paper if you want to make it bigger. And you're going to draw 5 boxes and draw an example of each group of vertebrates. Write a label for each group. So go back into the booklet and find where it talks about vertebrates, as in animals that have backbones. And draw a picture of each group and make sure you label your picture. Then it asks you to draw an example of an animal adaptation. So you're going to go in where it talks about animal adaptations, reread or rewatch the video to figure out what you could draw to show an animal adaptation. Number 3 talks about how are cells like building blocks. This was the very first thing that we read in this booklet, talking about building blocks. So go back to the beginning of the video or go back to the beginning of the booklet where it talks about how cells are similar to building blocks. And you're going to draw a picture to go with your answer of how they are similar. So that is your last science lesson for this week. Next week, we get 3 science lessons, all still about animals and organisms. Very excited. I love this subject. If anyone has any questions, feel free to message me, call me, email me. Love this topic, love discussing this topic. Hope to hear from you guys. Get out there, think, observe, ask questions. Anything you can do to build your scientific skills, because science is a big part of life and learning. I hope you guys are healthy and staying home and being kind and respectful with your parents, please. Hope to see you guys soon, okay? Bye.